Well, you know what? Whether you like it or not, you're getting older today. And we're all going to grow one day older by the end of the day. Time's not static. It doesn't stand still. They change. We change. Everything changes. I remember a conversation I had, I guess it's 35 years ago. My friend Ralph in Fremont was well into his 90s, so that means he'd probably be about 130 today if he were still with us. He'd had an illustrious life. He'd had a brilliant life, and he was a brilliant man with a big, bold voice and musical sensibilities, and was playing organ up until close to when he died, and conducting at least one or two discipleship groups in his home, and conducting a weekly service for a senior citizen complex every week, discipling people, encouraging people, and investing his life not only in the old, but in younger people who flocked to his home and flocked to his life. And I remember that conversation well for two things. One was, he said, I'm going to a place where they serve ice cream sundaes every day. He loved ice cream sundaes. And so I thought that was rather delightful. But his closing words to me as I left his room and in his home were to raise his hand almost in benediction, as he often did in my life and to me as his pastor. And he said, tell the people that we still have faith. Tell the people that we still have faith. And to me, that was just a strong word and reminded me of the book of Hebrews. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment because that's our text. If we're blessed to live long enough, there are some things that will happen. One is we may find that our bodies don't work as well as they used to. Another thing we might notice is that it takes longer to do some tasks than it used to take. But I'm going to tell you the good news. It doesn't take nearly as long to do some things as it used to take. I find that some things I can accomplish far more quickly at this stage of my life than I could when I was younger. Before I had the experience, before I had the understanding, before I had some of the wisdom that I've gained with age. Clarence Darrow said, a man of 20 is full of fight and hope. He wants to reform the world. When he's 70, he still wants to reform the world, but he knows he can't. I don't know how true that is. I think it's somewhat true, and I think it's more true for others than it is for all. But it's sometimes true, and it's sometimes just partially true. But there are some caveats to that. There are some exceptions to that. And the exceptions are, what do you do with the wisdom you have? What do you do with the knowledge you have? What do you do with the time that you have? There are people who have really begun to do great things in their 70s. Harlan Sanders didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was 65 years old. He'd been peddling hams in his life. And he had 1,009 rejections for investors, we're told. But he went ahead and did it. He went ahead and invested his time and whatever income and whatever money he had. Nelson Mandela was 72 years old when he was released from prison and began to reshape South Africa. And some people might say, well, what a waste. All that time, that 25 years that he spent in prison can never be reclaimed. And what can he do now at 72? Well, history tells us that well into his 90s, he was still making a difference, like my friend Ralph back in Fremont. He was still making a difference well into his 90s. So many people we know have remained active into their golden years, have written their best material, have done their best work, have really begun to invest their lives. Big dreamers never stop dreaming, they never stop hoping, they never stop trying to make a difference. So here's one of the two verses that I want to share with you from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. These all died in faith without having received the promises they saw from a distance, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on the earth. That comes out of Hebrews 11, the Chronicles of Faith, that begins with the words, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But the heroes of faith that are cited in the book of Hebrews by its writer to illustrate what faith looks like in the real world, they died in faith, not having received the tangible promises. And then they are, he says it again in verse 30, they were approved in their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us that would not be made perfect without us. So how do we cope with that realization that we don't get everything in this life that we invest our faith in? And how does faith figure into this? Now, Darrow may have been right on a couple of points. We learn with age that we cannot change the world all by ourselves. It takes teamwork, it takes community, it takes cooperation, and it takes the next generation. And the second thing is we learn that it can't be overnight. We may not live to see all the changes we desire, but as the writer of Hebrews states about those who lived in faith but did not receive the promises, that it takes the coming generation. It takes the coming generation. So how do we cope with this? How do we live with this? Well, we will not face discouragement as long as we learn the lesson of shifting gears in the closing years of our life, whether they be 50 closing years or 75 closing years or 25 closing years or 10 or 2 or 1. What we do is to make these wonderful years, to make these productive years, is the gears we shift are to equipping the next generation, passing on what we have, co-learning with younger people, and investing ourselves in younger people. The poet Robert Browning, in his poem, beautiful poem, Rabbi Ben Ezra, his opening verse, at least one of his opening verses says, grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made. Our times are in his hand. He quotes Psalm 31 there. Our times are in his hand, who saith, a whole I planned. Youth shows but half. Trust God, see all, nor be afraid. And at the end of the beautiful poem, which you can download from my blog, he said, therefore I summon age to grant youth's heritage. Life's struggle having so far reached its term, thence shall I pass approved, a man for aye removed. But the developed brute, a God through in the germ, a God though in the germ. Pretty deep poem, pretty, and it has a lot of exploring territory. But here's the part that propels me on. The last helps define the first. The ending caps off the beginning. And so as we transition into the 12th chapter of Hebrews 12, we have a reminder and a prototype. Seeing as we are compassed by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the source and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that lay before him endured the cross, despised the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God's throne. So Jesus died very young, but he lives forever. The heroes of the faith, some died young, some died old, but what they did was they invested in not only their own lives, but in the lives of generations to come. If our life is defined by getting what we can out of this life and then saying goodbye, we're going to die unhappy. We're going to die unfulfilled. We're going to die miserable. We're going to die without a sense of having accomplished our purpose. But if we see ourselves as just as pliable in God's hands and usable by God, and for some reason I want to sing all in all, it's not just another brick in the wall. But if we see ourselves as a brick in God's wall, as we see our lives as part of something bigger than ourselves, and if we're using the time that we have to take what we have and invest it in others, especially younger people, and if younger people, if we, because we're still younger than some, I still have a living mother, she'll probably hear this, and she's still young and viable and in her 90s, very active. So I'm not the oldest generation in my family still. I still have a living uncle who is not in the best of health, but is still thinking and living and being a part of investing in his son and his son's wife, and we're part of a chain. We're learning from the old. And you know what? I'll never stop learning from the old, even those that are not breathing, because I'm reading them. I'm listening to them because some of them have recorded their voices before they died. So I'm a part of learning from those who have gone before me, and I'm a part of investing in those who will carry on after me. And that's how we handle it. That's how we handle growing old. It's never a downer. It's always just a part of what God is doing in our world. And so I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit today. I wrote a little bit about it in my blog, and you can hear that beautiful song that was written by John Lennon. And I think where I posted it, it's by Mary Chapin Carpenter, an interpretation of Browning's poem, Rabbi Ben Ezra. And you can apply it as you will to your life today. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today? How are you going to invest a little bit of your time, your energy, and your wisdom in someone younger than you who can pass it on to someone younger than them? Think about that today. But don't think too long about it so that you just spend your day thinking about it. Find something to do about it and do it. That's what I've got for you today. May not be brilliant, but it's something. I think if you take it and you chew on it a little bit and you cogitate over it, you might be able to make something out of this Bible study that I've started with you. That's my challenge. And then share what you learned, and just share your vision of all this and your prayer requests. And may the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and be gracious unto you and give you peace. I'm sitting out here with the chickens, and they're saying, why didn't you bring us some lettuce or celery today? You're just sitting here. I guess I'm going to have to go get them a little snack. Take care.